we start the talk this morning, and on behalf of our remote audience, if you're watching this YouTube and you've never had an opportunity to join the actual live streaming of our broadcast, I certainly invite you to do so. We start at 10 o'clock, 10:30 each Sunday morning, Mountain Standard Time. And you are welcome to go to our website and look on the calendar to see what the topics are, and then decide if you would like to join us for a whole hour. It really is a nice experience, particularly because of our meditation. Our meditations are very powerful, and they're based on seed thought, group meditations. Okay, so this morning I'm talking about the inner requirements to make contact with an ashram. So I was thinking about those that are listening to or watching the YouTube remotely, or those of you who have just joined us for our live stream broadcast, and thinking, if this is your first exposure to the idea of an ashram and the teachings, how can this seem real to you? And even if you are very much a student of the Ageless Wisdom teachings and maybe have not yet had contact with a higher ashram, how can you make the content of this morning's talk real to you? And I think that there's a couple of ways that you can approach this. The first way is using your creative imagination. Just think of the most beautiful environment that your creative imagination will allow you to create. And in that environment, there is a frequency not of this world. It is a frequency that when you move into such an environment, you become awake. The spiritual energy in you becomes ignited and very powerful. And you begin to have glimpses of your future, of what you are going to be in the next few years or the next few incarnations, life after life after life, by moving into and being in such an environment. It's so beautiful to think about that, isn't it? And the second approach is, if you know about the life of Nicholas Rourke and Helena Rourke and Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and the masters, and certainly the teacher that we study so much in this group, Torkim Saradarian, all of them have been part of the ashram in some leadership capacity. And as you study, I was thinking of the three books now, of the letters of Helena Rourke, the two books that everybody knows about that have been published for many, many years, and the third book called The Threshold of the New World, which has many of her letters in there, where she talks about her experiences. Helena Rourke talks about her experiences with the masters, that's an S. And for these great ones, their life, their contact with the ashram, as we might imagine, is every moment of their life. From the time they wake to the next day, 24 hours every day, they have a consciousness that is always, every moment, in contact with the ashram. So these great ones are our leading lights to show us what our future can be and to show us what the purpose of life is all about. Until we've made ourselves ready and we can actually contact this ashram or the ashrams of which our nature can be affiliated with, we can use our creative imagination as we are preparing ourselves, as we are making ourselves ready. So the next point, for those of you who are not knowledgeable, we need to think about what is an ashram. Sometimes we make it so fantastical that we make it beyond our reach, beyond our reality. So let's think of an ashram as being a great center of energy. Just that, a great center of energy and light and love. That's what that whole ashram radiates. First, that it is a center of great energy, of love and light. And the next, once we understand what an ashram is, then our question is going to be, how do we make contact? I remember back in, oh my gosh, when I was so young, and studying with different teachers, and I would be so frustrated because they wouldn't bring forth the mysteries of the teaching. And I knew the mysteries were right there, but I had to find a way to open the door to walk across the threshold. And I felt like those teachers should have opened the door for us so we could have crossed the threshold. And now, in hindsight, those early teachers I realized they did not have contact. So it was not until I met my first ashramic teacher that moment of contact with him, the door flew open, I raced or ran across the threshold, and I was there. I was right there in that mystery school, in the ashram. So these are the mysteries of life, of the spiritual life that we have available to us, but we do have to make ourselves ready. So after we can understand and think about an ashram as being a great center of energy and light and love, then and we really want to have that experience, then we realize we have some work to do. And that work to do is making ourselves ready. We must have a credit card in our hands. I know. We must have a credit card to enter into the ashram. So what is our credit card? This is not the kind of credit card where we think of financial debt that we accrue. This is a holy credit card, or maybe we could even say it's a cosmic credit card. This credit card represents our fruit, the fruit of our labors, the fruit of how many people we have helped. But in making ourselves ready, we have to save ourselves first. I was thinking how a family member, she's no longer alive, but a family member used to pride herself on being right there to help everybody. She was an older woman when I met her, and she lived in a trailer park, and she would take all of these elderly people to the hospital and to doctors, and to have their tests done and so forth. And she would bake for them and make pies and fruit and vegetables, and I was so admiring of her. And then one day she was very, very angry, and I asked her what was going on. She said, "I just don't understand this. Look at all that I do for all these people here in the trailer park, and not one of them are doing anything for me. She blew it right there. The credit card was put through the shredder, right? So in her next lifetime, hopefully that she will have an opportunity to serve like that without expectation of due reward. So first we must save ourselves, to prepare ourselves and to make ourselves beautiful. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I was thinking of Shambhala. You know, Shambhala is an ashram. Shambhala has been written about by different authors, and they've called it many, many names. But esotericists know that this great, great, great center of energy that is headed by Sanat Kumara, this great archangel, is called Shambhala. And Shambhala is, as we were doing the meditation this morning, and I couldn't help but think about Shambhala as we are journeying on the path to reach the summit, that shining light at the summit of the mountain was Sanat Kumara, you know, the head of the ashram of Shambhala. Who are some of the other members of this great ashram? We've read about them. The one member that perhaps comes to mind that might be a surprise to you or not would be the planetary logos. The logos that runs the entire planet Earth. Other planetary logos also are members of Shambhala. Our planetary logos is the soul of the Earth planet, and the planet is his dense physical body. This ashram is headed by 3 Kumaras, the head of whom, of course, is Sanat Kumara. And it might be helpful for you to think of Sanat Kumara as an archangel. Maybe not, but for some of us, we need something a little bit more concrete, you know, a word that we can identify or an image we can identify with. So we can recognize that Sanat Kumara is a great archangel that came from, this is going to sound a little far out, but bear with me. Sanat Kumara was from the Venus chain, not the planet Venus, but the Venus chain. And if you want to learn more about that, you can read The Secret Doctrine. You can read, I think, Cosmos and Man tells you a little bit about that. But we have a short time this morning, so I can't get into it. I just wanted to plant some ideas for you to follow up with. There are actually 7 Kumaras that function in a very high capacity in this ashram we call Shambhala, including, of course, Sanat Kumara. And these 7 Kumaras, they are, we could certainly call them extra-worldly, otherworldly. Great, great leading lights. Interestingly enough, they are spoken about in the Eastern scriptures. And of course, I mentioned earlier the Secret Doctrine. These 7 Kumaras came from higher worlds, and they made great sacrifices by doing so, by incarnating as founders of religions. Now think about this. These 7 Kumaras came from higher worlds. They incarnated as founders of the religions, of kingdoms, and philosophies. Also, during all the turning points in the history of our planet, they incarnated in order to quicken the evolution of humanity. I hear people say today, something's happening in the world. Look, we can't identify it, but something is happening. And they usually begin by talking about the changing weather patterns and the increase of war and killings, and the frequency of people dying seems to be increasing, and so on and so forth. But we have the ability to see what's going on behind that. And that is, maybe it takes a little creative imagination, but I think these Kumaras are incarnating. I don't think they're walking the planet yet, but I think they are in a close enough sphere of energy that we are feeling them. We are experiencing them. And the way we experience this energy is by a change in our own energy. Our energy is quickening. When we talk about this credit card, this credit card represents our karma. It collects all that we do. And we can spend, what we put on, called credit, on that card to help us get through certain troubled times. But we also want to eliminate our karma, our bad karma, and replace it with a frequency that will take us to the ashram and help us see our future. So as you see changes going on in the world today, as you see leaders of nations, and particularly those leaders that are very vocal and very well known, look to see, because some of these leaders, maybe a handful, will be a Kumara. And if this is true, we're going to see the leaders of the army of darkness as well, leading those countries and leading their people, instead of going and journeying up to the summit of the mountain, they're going to take them down, further down, in an evolutionary manner. So these are, I'm just planting some ideas for you to think about. You don't have to believe what I'm saying. But don't listen with your brain. Don't listen with your brain, listen with your heart. So that's Shambhala and the 7 Kumaras and Sana Kumara and our planetary logos. There are also earthly ashrams. Earthly ashrams. There has to be earthly ashrams. As above, so below. So there has to be ashrams that we can see physically with our eyes. In each ashram, there is a teacher who answers to the master, not to popular opinion and not to society, but to the master. In the earthly ashrams, there are among the members 3 disciples who are close to the teacher. There may be more, but there has to be 3. Each must understand the plan and the purpose of the ashram. And these 3 will be the transmitters between the teacher and others. The ashram is constructed upon a trinity. I know this is very esoteric, but this teaching is part of the mystery school. that I was so hungry to understand all those years ago. So we are fortunate now to have these teachings, that are so available to us because we have found them. The next thing to know about an ashram is that it represents our future, as I've said. It is the ashram that unveils the future that we are to become. Now, you may say, well, how can that be? Do we go into a room and see a movie of ourselves, of what our future is going to be? No, it's not that easy. That happens at another point, which we could talk about later, someday, not today. What it does is that it reveals ourselves to ourselves. The ashram reveals ourselves to ourselves. And that's when the work starts. That we see the part of ourselves that need to be refined, that need to be ready so that we can handle this highly fiery charge of energy and not self-destruct in the meantime. So the ashram provides us with opportunities to grow in ways that we never expected. And as we begin to grow, spiritually grow, we give birth to our humility. And if you don't understand humility, to me, one of the greatest examples, living examples that was presented to the world was the humility of Mother Teresa. A woman of universal power, but of humility we can't allow ourselves to have, because why? Well, you have to answer that question. So the ashram, in the ashram we become the future and realize that our future, our unfolding process of moving into the future is more important than our past. This is why when disciples get together, they don't talk about their childhood. They don't talk about all the sad things that happened to them and the difficulties. They talk about their future and what their future lives may be, and how they can be of greater service to hierarchy and the plan. So the ashram is related to our future. That Christ said, let the dead bury the dead, which is to say, do not occupy yourselves with the past. Now, in the time that's left, I'm going to go through some of the ways that we can meet the inner requirements to contact the ashram. And this first requirement is meditation. And why? Why meditation? For those of you who engage in true meditation, meditations that have been designed for us by the ashram, make us magnetic. It increases our magnetic power, the magnetic power of our mental aura. When a certain degree of magnetism is created in our aura, then we attract, listen to this very carefully, then we attract the corresponding ashram and make contact with it. Again, I'm just touching the surface here. So think about it. When we end our live stream broadcast this morning, hopefully you're making notes, and you can think about it this afternoon, tonight, coming weeks and months. What does it mean that when our magnetic power is ignited and ignites our mental aura. What does this mean that we begin to attract the corresponding ashram? The first sign of contact is that you are flooded with many new ideas and visions. Also required to contact an ashram, as you might imagine, is a life dedicated to selfless service. But you must have a field of service to which you are dedicated, other than your business, other than where you make your income. So this field of service can be a philanthropic endeavor or a dedicated labor where you serve without expectation. You must perform this dedicated labor at least 1 hour every day. And in this busy world, to take an hour off, to dedicate yourself in sacrificial labor, is tough to do. But this is how the great ones determine our motives for entering the ashram. They need to make sure that our motives are not selfish. Why is that? When you, how can I say this? Let's say that you have dedicated yourself to serve a great one, and that great one has instructed you to establish a center of light. And you say, absolutely, that's my life's work. I want to do this. Without really knowing what that is going to entail. And your work begins, and your life changes, and your relationships change, and your responsibilities increase. You can't take 2 weeks vacation because of the various earthly reasons that you're supposed to go on a vacation. You're supposed to travel to Europe and you don't have the money. How are you going to get there? You have to go to Europe. The ashram is sending you to Europe or South America. And maybe 1,000 years from now to Mars. We don't really want to go to the moon. Been there, done that, right? So this is why we need to make ourselves ready and to understand what participating in a dedicated field of service is all about. We have to make ourselves ready. That credit card has to have enough good karma that it will let us enter into the ashram. And when we're in that ashram and we are sent to Europe, somehow the money comes. Desiring to enter an ashram for wisdom, knowledge, to see the ceremonies and so on is considered very selfish. So the head of the ashram must have proof that you are sacrificial. The reason for entering an ashram is for service. In some places in the world, people think that they can buy their way into an ashram, but they cannot. The person must develop those credentials which will afford him entry. I know people who have tried to financially sustain our work as a group, and they give their money, initially very generously, and then they begin to criticize the group members. Why haven't they given that kind of money? We've given, look at how much money we have given. Why haven't they given anything? And I say, look at what they're giving. They're giving their talent. They're giving their time. They're serving selflessly. They're giving up a lot to serve the plan of hierarchy. Your job is to give up your money. We don't live in a world where those who make the gold make the rules. We live in a world where the Master and the Ashram and Christ and Sana Kumara makes the rules. And that's very difficult to understand in a society that goes by that old axiom that those who make the gold make the rules. There's an amazing story I read recently about a woman who was able to function in the ashram. She didn't study or even meditate. Now that's pretty shocking when one of those, steps to get into and have contact with the ashram is meditation. But there are many reasons for this. Anyway, she took care of 6 babies for her neighbors every day for 4 hours. She did this without expectation and was never paid any money to do this. And when the children's mother would return, she would find her children dressed, cleaned, bathed, and cared for. So this neighbor proved that she could serve selflessly. And this is what we must demonstrate that we can do as well. Another step is to exercise right human relations. For example, let us say that we have a lot of tension and trouble with our spouse, or with our children, or our neighbors. We are held to a task, which is to create harmony, no matter what. No matter what. No, there are no excuses. Anytime we gossip and slander, are malicious or jealous or critical, we cannot enter the ashram. Christ explains this through a parable about a rich man who gave a party. The guest arrived who was not properly dressed, and he was not allowed entrance into the party. In this parable, the party symbolizes a gathering of people in the ashram. The dressing, the clothing, represents the person's consciousness. If this consciousness if it's not all together, if it is not beautiful, if it is not made of sacrificial work and labor and purity of mouth and heart and mind, then he cannot enter the ashram. It's as simple as that. In one of his books, Master Moria describes how Urasvati dresses in the subtle world. Do you know what you look like in the subtle world? Do you know what your garment is made of in the subtle world? This is something to think about. Urasvati wears a violet Greek style dress. That is her consciousness. And takes the shape, that consciousness takes the shape of a dress. It is so pure and beautiful because her mind is pure, and her eyes are pure, and her ears are pure, and her mouth is pure. Okay, let me give one more. We must try to find people who are ready for the teaching and cautiously and wisely lead them into the teaching. There are 3 points we are told when we try to bring people into the teaching that we must do. The first thing is we must make the people love and respect us because of our beauty. Not because of our money and our power and our position and our cars and houses and jobs and so on and so forth, but because of our beauty. They must learn how to love beauty. The second is to talk to the person about the teaching that we receive. Not proselytizing, not standing in street corners with signs but we find other ways. And the third is to lead the person to the source of your wisdom. We're not the source. We're the mouthpiece, but we're not the source. So we have to find a way to lead the person to the source of our wisdom. We oftentimes do the opposite. We bring them to the teaching without demonstrating beauty in our lives, in our own lives. So the first test is our beauty. People must admire you first. Unless they admire you, you are a hypocrite. You must demonstrate your beauty, even if people are gossiping about you. None of this matters if you are yourself. You can lead people into the teaching because by doing so, you gain credit from the hierarchy. Okay, let me, I know we're out of time, but let me say this much. I think it's important to remember that alcohol and drugs are detrimental to those who want to make contact with the ashram. Let us say that you have contact with an ashram and 10,000 volts of electricity hit your brain. I've mentioned this several times that when I met Torquem and spent a few days with him, the first thing is I couldn't stop smiling. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. It was so incredible. And the next thing, and this is has to do about the volts of electricity, that when I would go in to take a shower, it was like plugging in, putting my wet hand into an electrical socket. I could hear the electricity popping. Yeah, it was quite remarkable. And that was just with one great being. Imagine being in an ashram, this great center of energy. And we come into that, make contact when we're drunk or when we're high. We're doing dope. Or I was thinking, but no, I won't go there, never mind. So, when we use marijuana or alcohol, what happens, and this is scientifically proven now, is that we weaken our brain cells and delicate networks so that when the voltage hits our brain, we are finished. You may think you're not finished, but in your heart of hearts, you're going to realize it. To enter an ashram is to link yourself with a power station if our bodies are pure and repaired so that it can handle the shock.